Genesis 1:27 only has 15 words in English, but this verse carries more theological weight than we think. So we will pull in the Hebrew, the ancient world, and how theologians of both the past and present have read it for 2,000 years. Because this verse says who you really are. Let me explain. Genesis 1:27 says, "So God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them." The Hebrew word for created is bara. Now, bara is a really specific word because it is only ever used when God is the subject slash the doer of the action. Now, humans build things, right? We build things, we form things, but we never get the same Hebrew word as God's. We never bara. This word is reserved exclusively for divine action. And this says a lot about us as human beings, right? Because on the get-go, we are taught that human beings are not made by just an ordinary craftsmanship, but by an act only God can do. So, through an act that only God can do, man is created. In Hebrew, this is Adam. In this verse, Adam is not a proper name of a man, but a collective term, though it becomes a proper name a couple chapters later. But here, it means humankind or humanity in general. Well, keep that in mind. This will be important in the later explanation. So, God created man in his own image. This is the exact phrase the scholars have spent centuries digging. And this is the part we'll spend most of our time. But before we dig out the treasure in this phrase, we need to talk about something that seems like a completely different subject. We need to talk about idols. Just stick with me here. I promise this will be worth it. Now, the nation surrounding Israel, the people there build statues for their God, right? They carve woods or stones for their God. But they don't think that the statue is the God itself. They're not that naive as we sometimes assume. Statue is a statue, God is God. The statue is only there as a stand-in for their God. There are scholars who study Mesopotamian ritual texts where the people have this ritual called mouth washing or mouth opening rites, where their priest has a tool that he uses to touch the mouth of their statue to symbolically invite their God to inhabit the statue. Now, that statue represents their God's authority and its presence in their temple. The same concept is also applied to their kings. Their kings are described as the living image of their God here on earth. But that title is only for royalty. If you're a farmer, a servant, or just an ordinary person, you are not qualified to have that title. Now, Old Testament scholar John Walton argues that Genesis is deliberately working off this same exact backdrop, but is completely overturning it by applying the title to every human being. How? Well, the verse uses the Hebrew word Adam for man, doesn't it? Which means humankind or humanity. So all of human being, which makes much more sense knowing that God is the Lord, the King, and the Father of all. Now that we have that information down, let's proceed to the exact phrase. For most of church history, the center of attention is this preposition in. And it is understood as that we possess something of God's quality in us, like the ability to love, the ability to make moral choices, to reason. Whatever it is, the idea is we are carrying a piece of God's image inside of us. And that's how we are created in His image. The problem with that reading is when you ask questions like, what about the people who lost their cognitive functions due to an injury or dementia, for example? Or what about the babies who have not yet developed moral reasoning? If this is about certain abilities people can do, but some people cannot do it, does that mean they are not made in God's image, or they stop being an image of God at some point in their life? In The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser, an Old Testament scholar, he points out that this preposition has a specific grammatical feature called Beth of identity or Beth essentiae, which means that the preposition in functions to express equivalence or identity. So instead of you have an image of God, it's more like you are an image of God. You have an image of God makes this about some quality you either possess or you don't. You are an image of God makes this about a status that you are given. Now, this distinction solves the problem of people losing their cognitive functions and babies not developed yet to make a moral decision. So, this isn't about who can or cannot show certain traits from God anymore, but that every human being, no matter what stage they are in life, rich or poor, blind or deaf or mute, all human beings carry the status of being an image of God. And this connects right back to what we covered earlier about idols and kings. Since image functions as a status, this means this title makes men as the authorized representatives of God stationed here on earth. The same way the idols are seen as representatives of the gods of the nations surrounding Israel. So every time the ancient audience would read this passage, this is what would echo in their minds: man being authorized representative of God here on earth. That's why man is given the dominion mandate in verse 28. God directs man to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and to rule over it. Now, the next phrase basically repeats what was just said, right? This is a classic Hebrew poetry emphasis. The key idea is repeated so that the readers would not miss it. It is repeated because it is important, as it is the main idea in this verse. That's the text underlining its own main point twice over. Historically, this repeated language in this verse is also from where Irenaeus built his famous distinction between image and likeness, which is from the previous verse, in the 2nd century when he wrote his book Against Heresies. And for Irenaeus, image refers to our natural, God-given rational capacity, and likeness refers to a deeper spirit-powered moral resemblance that was lost at the fall and the one that Christ restores. This framework of Irenaeus shaped centuries of theology after him, though most modern Hebrew scholars read both words as one single idea, only expressed in two different ways. Now, the next part of the verse says, male and female he created them. This phrase doesn't get talked about enough, and this phrase explicitly tells us that both genders, male and female, bear the image of God fully and equally. There is no ranking one above the other. This is what St. Augustine wrestled with extensively in his book on the Trinity, because 1 Corinthians 11:7 seems to complicate things, because this verse talks about the man being the image and glory of God and the woman being the glory of the man. You might think the verse sounds like men are one rank above than women in the sight of God. Well, Augustine ultimately affirmed that both men and women fully bear the image of God, since the image is located specifically in the rational soul, and the soul isn't being male or female. Similarly, John Calvin, in his Institutes of the Christian Religion, though he is more direct, he said women also bear the image of God without qualifications needed, because the substance of the image is also in the soul, not in physical or social distinctions between the two. So it's much like Augustine's. You can also see the shift in the pronouns here, from he created him, which is singular, to he created them, to plural. And some commentators read this as the verse talking about humanity as a single collective category first, and with the shift in pronouns is the verse recognizing both sexes as individuals, both equally given the status of being images of God. Okay, so we've spent this whole video looking at what the verse says, but I think it's worth asking practically in our day to day life, what does it actually look like to live this out? Because saying you are God's image isn't just a theological statement, don't you think? It's supposed to shape how you live. So I think the very first one we have to do is to represent God, not just resemble Him. Another interesting thing about kings in the ancient world is they would set up their image in a city that they couldn't personally be in. And that image meant this place is under my rule. That is a function, not just a decoration. So, living as God's image means your life is meant to make His character visible wherever you are. How you treat people, how you speak, how you handle whatever authority you've been given. Remember that you're supposed to be a stand in for Him so that through the way you reflect Him, you'd point other people to Him to glorify Him. We also mentioned briefly the dominion mandate. Thomas Aquinas ties this specifically to our capacity to know and love God, and that is exactly what's supposed to shape how we rule. That means whatever God gave you to steward for your work, your resources, your relationships, or even the actual creation around you, you're meant to care for it the way a good king cares for his kingdom, and not to extract from it or dominate it for your own gain. We should exercise dominion wisely. Another thing is, do you remember the third commandment? You shall not use the name of the Lord your God in vain. For a long time, I thought that this was just about using the name of God in swear words. And sure, that is in there. But I realized that this commandment might be less about cursing and more about not misrepresenting God altogether. So living as His image means your life should not contradict what you claim to carry. In 2 Timothy 2:19, Paul says something similar. Let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. So your life should be lived out according to the name you carry. You have to bear the name well. Like the creation is watching you and you do these things that do not represent God or things that tarnish the name of God. Because you carry His name, you are His image bearer. This would reflect to God and this would not bring glory to Him at all. And I know it's easier said than done. That's why we have to look at Christ as the pattern. Colossians 1:15 and Hebrews 1:13 call Jesus as the perfect image of God. And so the clearest answer to what does this actually look like is just look at Him. However He treated people, however He used power, however He related to the Father, that is the template. And of course, this isn't something you nail once and move on from them. Paul in 2 Corinthians 3:18 says that believers are being transformed into the image of Christ from glory to glory. So it is a direction. This is something that you keep growing into. So being God's image isn't just about identity, it's about vocation, a job, a calling, or a way of living that plays out in ordinary moments and not just theological debates. So that's Genesis 1:27, 15 words, but a lifetime of study packed into them and a life template as well. Well, if this video has been any help and if you think this is worth showing to more people, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.